So it's my pleasure to introduce our speaker today, Mark Warren. Mark is the owner of Medicine Bow Wilderness School in Dahlonega. For over 45 years, Mark has been teaching about nature and the survival skills of the Cherokee.
I want you to think for a moment about the world in terms of just nature. You all know that we've all read enough from plenty of books about the history of the world. There was a time when there were no people, right? There was a time when there were no flowers. All of the plants were fern-like and reproduced by spores. No flowers were made. And then that changed. And the change is part of something that became a huge conflict among philosophies with people. It's all about that word, evolution. Nature, the story of natural history is all about things achieving success. And this includes humans. It makes perfect sense to me. If you followed my line of thought in what I was just explaining to you, it makes sense to me that everything that a human needs is here. And that includes medicines. A lot of people look down on the concept of medicines that are out in the woods because, we call that, often refer to that as folk medicines, because there's so many folk tales about how to use plants, and many of those folk tales are very misleading and false. So it would be dangerous to just go out and act on folk tales that you've heard about plants. An herbalist has an apothecary, a collection of all kinds of herbs that have been dried, and I don't have that. What I have is the woods, and I think of the woods as the medicine cabinet. So let's jump into this and learn some of these, and feel free to ask some questions along the way if you want. See that little collection of tiny wood in there? I want you to know where that comes from, because we have a tree here that is very common. It's called mountain pine by the locals. In a book you would see it as white pine. The tallest tree in Eastern America. Did you know that? White pine makes a chemical called terpene. T-E-R-P-E-N-E. Highly flammable. And the terpene remains in the wood even after the wood is dead. So you've got a tree that's acting like a drying rack for you if you're a fire maker. It's just waiting for you to come out and find your kindling there. You can't ask for a better kindling. Easy to gather. Look how tiny the branchlets are. Can you see them? How tiny those are? A handful of those, just a handful, a mound in my hand. If I placed that on a grill so that it was safe, and I lit it, you would have about 2-foot high flame from that, because it's chemical burn. The medicine that I use more than any other with my students is red maple. It is the best medicine I have ever encountered for serious burns. And you have to crush those leaves until that water has cooled. So the timing on this all depends on how big your container is, right? If you have a real big pot that you're doing this in, that's going to take a long time to cool. But a cup, not long at all. So many times I've done this with a cup when we've had a burn at camp. There's our white pine that we gathered kindling from for the fire. Here's how to recognize white pine. Almost all pine trees develop what we call compound leaves. How many folks in this room have ever heard of that term before, inner bark? It's not well known, and obviously I can see that here. I think only one person raised a hand. Everybody knows the outer bark, right? We see that all the time, and that's the way we recognize a lot of trees. The inner bark is the next layer in. If you were to take a knife and shave away all the outer bark on a tree, the very next layer would very much look alive. The outer bark's dead. Nothing's happening with the outer bark. It's cork. It's just cellulose. But the next layer is very much a flesh of the tree called the inner bark. The tree leaves make all the chemicals that the tree can make, but then certain chemicals are allowed to go down to the roots, and certain chemicals are never allowed to go down to the roots. And the ones that remain in the leaves are often, it's a combination of things, but one of those is often a strong toxin to protect the leaf from being eaten up by insects or other predators, such as wildlife that eat leaves or whatever. Take the leaf in your hand, right in the middle of the leaf, and you're going to very gently pop open the midrib vein. And if you do it very, very slowly, it might take you a full minute to do this slowly, and you'll see inside of it these little strands of white that look like spider silk. It's actually latex. Dogwood is one of the trees you can see that latex in its veins, so try that. That bark is hard to mistake too. All right, here is the famous cure that's been used hundreds and hundreds of years from dogwood. It is a fantastic fever reducer. Now, fever reducing is a really big deal, and people don't consider it that way anymore because it's pretty easy to address now, isn't it? I just know that there were probably so many awful experiences in the past of people having to be submerged into a mountain stream when you're desperate to get that person's temperature down. High fever kills, and if it doesn't kill, it can destroy parts of the brain. If fever cooks part of your brain, who knows what you would lose, some kind of motor skill or the ability to talk or smell or whatever. You just can't say what it would be. Fever is a big deal, was a big deal. Sassafras is a well-known tree because it's, for one thing, it's got a name that's really fun to say. Sassafras is a native word, and it means green twig. Sassafras has been known for a long, long time as a spring tonic. If you could go back 500 years and talk to some person who was living right here, why do you drink sassafras tea every spring? And they would tell you, well, it just makes me healthier. I don't know why. We now know why. Because, and this, by the way, is a tea made from the roots of the plant. And this is easy to do, very easy. It doesn't require any special measurements at all. You simply take a piece of root from sassafras, and you'll know you have it, the correct root, if you smell it and suddenly think about the last time you had a root beer. It smells exactly like root beer. So you're going to wash that off and put some score marks in it with your knife and put that in a jar with water, with warm, hot water, will be fine. And then when that water all turns visibly pink, when it just turns pink, then get yourself some kind of tongs and pull that root out of there because it's ready. You now have the medicine that you need. Why is it a spring tonic? Why does it make you healthier? Because inside of here is safrole, a chemical that we know from experiments is carcinogenic, but it's a tiny amount. It's not enough to do us any harm. And plus, it's balanced inside the root with lots of other chemicals. This is the one that this gentleman who made so many stones in his life, this is the plant that changed his life. Pipsissewa, great word. The word means breaks apart the stone. Okay, I can't end my program without doing this one because this is the one that everybody's going to eventually fall in love with. Jewelweed is an impatiens If you have that potted plant impatiens at your home, you're lucky. It's going to work just like this wild one does. Many trees make salicylic acid. The one that's most famous for making it because of the quantity is willow. And salicylic acid is the precursor of aspirin. So in a survival book, you might read, get a headache, chew on a willow twig. What they don't tell you in that book, but wait, I tell you in my book, it takes 8 hours for salicylic acid to be assimilated by the human body. And this is why scientists tagged on the acetyl part to salicylic acid to make aspirin. It works immediately. It's a good thing. That was a good lab move right there. Okay, I know, sorry I've gone over time, but thank you for sticking with me.